Yeah. Good. Looks like, ooh, feeling lonely up here. Yeah. I know. This is a good turnout.
All right. Are we good to start? Cameron, yeah? All right. Well, let's go ahead and jump into this. Hello, everyone. Thanks for coming. Glad to see so many people here. My name is Benjamin Terry. I am a senior lecturer and the area coordinator of painting here at UTA. I worked with our visual resources curator, Lilia Kudelia, to bring the panel together entitled What's Up with Galleries? For this discussion, I was largely focused on introducing our students to some of the important faces of the Dallas art scene, where many of you here in the audience and watching online will be active participants in the very near future, if not already. I wrote questions in hopes of generating some insight into the thinking of how and why some of our local commercial galleries operate the way they do, better contextualize the Dallas gallery scene so it might not feel like such an abstract concept to some of you just starting to break in, demystify the relationship between artists, galleries, and museums, and ultimately answer the question, what is up with galleries? I am almost certain some of you in the audience will have questions at the end of this. There may be some people watching online. You guys can feel free to chat some questions at us, and we'll try to get those in at the end as well. So don't be shy. We'd love to have you guys participate in this when you guys get the chance. But without further ado, I'll introduce our three guests here. I'm going to work my way from left to right, starting with Adrian Zuñiga. He received a BFA in painting from the University of Texas at Arlington in 2012. So he was right here where you are now, 12 years ago. Upon receiving his BFA, he began working at the Dallas Gallery, Gallery Urbane, where he quickly moved up from gallery intern to gallery assistant. After a couple years there, he moved to London to study at Sotheby's Institute of Art, where in 2017, he completed an MA in contemporary art. He moved back to Dallas to serve as the director of exhibitions at Gallery Urbane. Not to loop myself into Adrian's bio here, but this proved a most fateful decision, as Adrian asked me to participate in one of the first group shows he curated upon his return, which ultimately led to my wonderful ongoing relationship with Gallery Urbane, so I feel incredibly grateful to Adrian. He will always have a special place in my heart. I'm very happy that he's here. However, in 2022, he left Gallery Urbane to open the Dallas location of Various Small Fires, where he now serves as director. I'm super happy for him. Since opening Various Small Fires, he's put shows together featuring the work of artists like Ross and Crow, Aaron Curry, Jeff Elrod, Mark Flood, Koshin Fenley, Sean Landers, and our friend and recent UTA alumni, Ari Brielle, among many others. In the middle, we have Erin Cluley. She is the owner of Erin Cluley Gallery, a contemporary art gallery presenting a provocative program of artists from Texas and the East Coast. Erin opened in 2014, igniting a creative movement in West Dallas, and recently moved her operation to the Riverbend development in the Design District. In April 2021, Erin opened a second location called Cluley Projects. Making a return to West Dallas, Cluley Projects acts as an incubator space focusing on regional artists and providing a platform for discovery and mentorship. Prior to opening her galleries, Erin received a BFA in painting from Midwestern State University in 2001 and an MFA in painting from Maryland Institute College of Art in 2005. She went on to serve as gallery director of C. Grimaldi's Gallery in Baltimore for 4 years before coming to Dallas as director of exhibitions at the Dallas Contemporary, where she worked on exhibitions with artists such as Kate Hardy, Julian Schnabel, and Shepard Fairey, among many others, over the course of 5 years before starting her own gallery ventures. last but not least, on the far right is Cody Fitzsimmons. He is the co-founder of and director of Tureen, a queer and indigenous-owned project-based contemporary art gallery located on historic Jefferson Boulevard in Dallas. Since its opening in summer 2023, Tureen has mounted ambitious and conceptually rigorous exhibitions for both emerging and mid-career artists. The gallery is highly focused on presentation, often transforming the space in order to fully realize an artist's fantasy. Notable exhibitions include solo presentations with, I'm going to butcher all of these names, I apologize, Sonia Kellier Combs, Teresa Cromati, and Lucas Stoklosa.
So you were pretty close. So Teresa Cromati was right, Sonia Kelleher Combs, and I call him Luke.
Okay, that's great. As well as two-person exhibitions with Kyle Thurman and Danny McDonald. Those were easy. On September 7th, this Saturday, they will open Sky Blue, a two-person show of work by Beverly Sems and Khalil Robert Irving that highlight both artists' interests in memory, absence, and monuments. Before opening Tureen, Cody began with a career in fashion and branding in New York. He eventually moved from New York to Houston to work at Hiram Butler Gallery. During the pandemic, Cody worked as an art advisor before finally making his move to Dallas to open his own space. In addition, along with his partner, Cody is an avid art collector, which you can see featured in a great article in May 2023, Paper City. Let's give these guys a round of applause. All right, great. Question time. First question. How would you guys compare Dallas to other major art markets like New York or Los Angeles? And what are some strengths and weaknesses of Dallas comparatively? What made you want to plant your gallery roots here as opposed to anywhere else? And all of these questions are like multi-part questions, so if that gets confusing, just I'll repeat it, it's cool. And whoever wants to jump in.
Let's see. Well, the gallery that I work for, Various Small Fires, Dallas is actually the third location. So it opened in Los Angeles in 2015, and the second satellite space opened in Seoul, South Korea back in 2019, and Dallas back in 2022. So we already had a pretty established market internationally, both on the U.S., West and East Coast, in Asia, and Europe as well. And so Dallas was a new venture for the gallery, and obviously it opened here because it knew, the owners knew that there was a ripe market here, and so to have Dallas on the map with these international markets is really impressive, and I think it speaks to the quality and the history of collecting here in the Metroplex. It is very different, I would say, from my experience. As Ben mentioned, I worked for a Dallas gallery before I was with VSF, and experiencing that shift between working with mostly regional collectors to working a little bit more internationally. I have Dallas, I would say, on a more granular level, they are interested in thinking about work. They're gonna be a little bit slower than maybe some people it's in LA, New York, where they're just ready to move on something. Their conversation might be a little bit longer, but that's sort of a granular answer. What do you have?
Yeah, and I think
ideas?
I think that there's some advantage of having a gallery in Dallas in terms of, we talked a little bit about this earlier about, we don't necessarily need to be competitive with these other markets. We can
Right.
kind of collaborate with galleries in New York and LA, because we kind of have this other region we're working with. And I think that's one advantage. I think there's the advantage of, not that things are, cheap or inexpensive here in Dallas, but certainly compared to New York and LA, just simply the overhead and cost of running a gallery in Dallas is going to be way different. And thus you can, things can tend to be more cutthroat in those other markets because but I feel like it's a friendlier, more collaborative environment with colleagues and things in Dallas. And then to kind of go off a little bit of what Adrian said, the economy tends to, even when the economy is, lagging in other places, I mean, globally, honestly, right now, but Texas in general tends to kind of keep a pretty strong economy no matter what. I mean,
I mean, the great thing about having a gallery in a place like Dallas is that it allows us to be a lot more nimble with our programming. So like several, not all, but like several artists that we work with already have galleries in LA and New York that they work with. So I can kind of sidestep that, which is, that kind of like, and as well as the overhead being low, that kind of like combination really allows for like a lot of experimentation. And also in like, New York specifically, I think there's so much pressure for younger galleries especially to make the discovery and give an artist their first show, and then they kind of like claim ownership over those artists. And while we also are interested in doing that and have given the first or second major gallery show to an artist, we also work with artists that have a very active exhibition history, and some of those artists have been exhibiting for decades. So like Ben mentioned, we're about to open the show with Beverly Sims and Khalil Robert Irving. Beverly has been exhibiting for like 40 years at an institutional level. And then Khalil, who's like a younger artist, but still an artist that kind of started out at the top, like one of his first solo shows ever was one of the projects at MoMA, and this was in like 2021. He was like 30 years old. So yeah, that kind of like lack of pressure, the lower overhead, the kind of like specificity of the region kind of allows for more experimentation that can like lead to exhibitions like this.
Yeah, not to throw my own anecdote in here, but I remember having a visiting artist when I was in grad school from New York, and I was talking to him and a professor after his talk, and he had said something about having some work in Dallas, and he was like, it doesn't matter, because like I can do whatever I want. And in my head I was like, oh, does that mean like nobody gives a shit about Dallas? Like, so I had that sort of ingrained in my mind, and then visited New York. I had a residency for like a month there, and my general opinion is the art in Dallas like holds up. There's obviously like extremes in New York, money and celebrity kind of art going on there, but the work here I think like keeps up. And coming back, I was just like so grateful for the amount of space that seems like a luxury in New York, and like I get to show in this gallery space with these huge white walls. I'm not like in the basement of an abandoned like mall in Chinatown or something,
Right.
Like I
An
didn't
old shoe
feel
store.
that kind of like scrappiness that I'm sure so many people in New York feel. So I think it's interesting, that perspective of artists feeling, I guess, kind of liberated to do
yeah,
whatever
because
they
I
want.
think that kind of speaks to like the ecosystem that we're all a part of, which is that the Dallas or regionally based artists have the luxury of things like space for their studios too, versus what's going on in New York. I feel like generally. I know that there's certainly artists who have big spaces to work in
Sure.
there, but there's a lot of artists there and not as much space. And so I think that, we as the gallerists benefit from that too,
Yeah.
in terms of if we're working with regional artists.
Yeah. There have certainly been some efforts made at times by our local museums to support local artists. The Nasher's Window series during the pandemic, the DMA adding select work from the Dallas Art Fair to their collection, annual grants from both of those major museums. The Fort Worth Modern does a billboard series. I'm curious if you guys think the relationship between our local museums and galleries is strong. Do you think there is enough local artists, regional artists that are being, I guess, supported by museums, and is that your role to sort of facilitate that? Yeah, and I guess where do you guys see that relationship standing, I guess, between Dallas galleries and museums?
I mean, I think that, I've had pretty good experiences with our institutions here, and I think it's, so much of it is relationship based over time, and, but I think a good example of, one example I sometimes share is, an artist I worked with previously, Francisco Moreno, who is a graduate from here as well, got a, micro grant from the Nasher. The Nasher was giving these artists grants, right? He had this idea, and it was kind of, he went to them with the idea, got the grant. We were already working together. He came to me with the idea and said, I want to, create this, enormous painting structure. It was called the Chapel, that he, built and then painted the interior of it. And then, so he came to me and said he wanted to show it. And then, we engaged Catherine Broadbeck at the Dallas Museum of Art kind of while it was up, and sort of started to talk with her about, could this be shown? Could this be acquired? And then from there, I was able to kind of garner some support from collectors, but also the institution, and they ended up acquiring it. And I felt like that was a really nice, combination of support from the institutions, but also from some collectors. And, and I know from just working at Dallas Contemporary kind of on the side of the museum is that, it's, you of course want to support your local, the local and regional scene. You can't support everyone, but I, in my experience, I think the institutions have done a good job of supporting the regional artists.
Yeah, I think that's been my general impression as well, and I think that's still a conversation that is ongoing. And I have friends that work at institutions in other regions, and it is on all of these institutions, on many of them, on their radar of how can we engage our local community, because at the end of the day, that is the community they're serving. And yeah, I think even now, recently the Dallas Contemporary has been engaging a lot with programming that features artists from the region and within Dallas and the area. And so I think there has been some great opportunities there. Of course, it's always a challenge. It can't serve every artist that's in the area, with the exhibitions that they have to put on and the funding that they have. So it's a challenge, of course. But I think that my impression is that the museums in the region do a pretty good job at supporting artists in the area. Maybe some of y'all have some different idea, a different perspective of that,
Yeah.
but like Erin, sort of knowing the back end of the reality of mounting those kinds of exhibitions. It's not just a matter of we have we have this gallery and let's invite artists to put their work in. unfortunately it isn't usually as streamlined as that. So
Right, funding and,
yeah,
you know,
a board.
Yes,
there's
right.
just a
Yeah,
lot of-
museums kind of present themselves, or many museums at least, present themselves as these kinds of like contemporary places for like new ideas and all of this stuff, but like the inner workings of the museums are archaic, you know, and there's like tons of politics and bureaucracy that is involved. So like, I think that there are, you know, certain museum staff that try, but that, you know, I think every person I know who works in a museum, you know, whether that be a chief curator or a ticket taker, and that's in Dallas or New York, has a horror story. You know, it's like it's tough.
and I think, you know, one thing I've been thinking about in the last few years is not just, you know, kind of not just seeking out what, of course, we would love, which is, you know, for our artists to have shows that, you know, everywhere from the DMA to MCA Chicago, MoMA, whatever, is to like really think about these regional institutions that are more nimble because there isn't maybe as much of the bureaucracy, and they can, you know, plan programming within a couple of years and stuff like that, is trying to find opportunities for our artists there, because they're great opportunities, and you know, like you're serving another community. It just may not be as expansive as some of these bigger institutions, but.
As a gallery, and this sort of touches on, you know, the idea that museums are seen as showing like the most progressive work. As a gallery, do you feel responsible for showing boundary pushing, avant-garde work, and perhaps starting new trends, or are you interested in finding work that is more of the moment and maybe more palatable to a broad audience? You guys obviously have commercial concerns to some extent, so how does that dictate your decision making when putting shows together?
I mean, I don't know if I feel like it's a responsibility. Maybe that's not the right word. I think that probably many people would say that we probably have the most challenging program in Dallas. I don't know if that's true. One compliment that I do like that we get is, and we were kind of talking about this at lunch, is that people always say, "Oh, your shows are like always so different," and that's something that I like. But I also think that like, as we continue to like build a history, that like I think a more distinct narrative will come out of that. But like at the end of the day, we're just like, you know, focused on showing like beautiful and exquisite objects, you know what I mean? It's not so contrived as saying like I want to do something boundary pushing, you know. Aesthetics are important to us, but the conceptual underpinning has to support the beauty, you know?
And I think that, you know, I worked for Dallas Contemporary for 5 years prior to opening the gallery, and, you know, one of the things we were always doing when I was there was, you know, most of the time we were commissioning artists to make new work to exhibit at Dallas Contemporary. So, I mean, that could be everything from, you know, a new body of paintings to something more installation-based or murals or whatever. And so when I opened the gallery, I had this, you know, the idea of that, you know, like seeing artists work in a larger context like that is really important, even if they then have the more palatable, you know, maybe commercially viable work. It's really nice to see that other part of their practice. And so from the start, I would tell, and I still do, tell the artists, you know, I like do something that feels experimental or installation based or whatever, but give me the things that I can sell. And that's just really, you know, because, you know, and that's all relative, right? Like what is going to sell. But, you know, I don't think that I'm ever saying that and compromising the artist's practice, because often they have those things. And, you know, my program is not going to be as, you know, of the three of our programs, I think, you know, whatever word you want to call. But anyway, safe or whatever you want to say or whatever. But I do encourage the artists to do the things that maybe are pushing the envelope a little bit more, but we are trying to make sales at the end of it to support both of our,
Sure.
financial well-being.
Yeah, I mean, I think our program is really driven by ideas first, and those are those conversations get exhibitions off the ground. Sometimes that does look like a painting show, and it's, again, like similar to what Cody said, we're not sitting there like, oh, what's going to be like the most like groundbreaking exhibition, but if we're having these conversations with these artists and we're interested in the ideas that they're putting forth, those are the shows that get off the ground in our spaces. And in our Dallas space, we have, I would say, our exhibitions tend to be more on the like 2D presentation, like whether that's painting or like wall-based objects, compared to our space like Los Angeles, where we might have a little bit more room for more challenging programming. Our show in September that is opening a week from Saturday on the 14th, is this historic project by a duo who have now passed called the Harrisons, and they were these leaders of the eco art movement. And we're mounting a project that they developed in the 70s that is a hog pasture that is like being grown indoors. One part of the exhibition will be like a hog that feeds on the pasture that's been grown and like fertilizes it, and it's like a cycle. So that's on the other end of the spectrum, where we do have these very like sort of neatly packaged exhibitions. But the through line is always going to be these conversations that we're having with the artist, whether that's about like questioning power structures, those kinds of conversations. It's always sort of going to be at the core there somewhere.
Let's see. I get stuck on this topic of sort of sellability and commercial viability a little bit here, but from my experience, a lot of work is sold in galleries, is moved through art advisors and corporate collections and things of that nature. What would you say the demographics of your collector base looks like? How do you work to bring in new collectors? Do you find yourself educating collectors to see value in work that may be challenging to them? And how much responsibility do you place on the artist to do that through written statements or artist talks and things of that nature? I'll throw in another question. Is it possible to have success with work that is, a hog grazing on a pasture? What does that success look like, and does it ultimately result in financial success?
Yeah, I'm trying to go through all those questions
Sorry.
now.
That was too many, I'm sorry.
Begin?
Well, I'll say that one of the shows that we did, it was actually our first. We opened with a group show last year, so it was the first solo show that we ever did, and I remember being so nervous that the show was not going to sell anything, because I thought people are going to find this work so challenging, and it looked like nothing like the kind of like colorful figurative painting that was really popular last year, or still is, I guess. I was like, oh my god, no one is going to get this. And that might be like one of the most challenging shows we've done so far, and it's actually been the most commercially and financially successful show that we've done. And maybe during the exhibition, we only sold 2 pieces, which I was like, oh, thank God, one was like, 5-figure piece, so I was, we made the rent. So we only sold 2 while the show was up. But like since September of last year, we've worked and placed almost the entire show, and like have had really great luck with setting great meetings up with her, with institutions and curators, and it's a relationship you know, right now we're not representing artists, but it's a relationship that we're going to continue because like we work really well together, and you know, it was like a risk that really paid off.
And I think like over, you know, the 10 years that we've been open, it's like we have, you know, yes, we work with consultants and advisors, and, you know, I love working with them. I mean, they have kind of their, you know, these are people who are coming with their own network of people to, you know, place work with. And so that may be that it's a hospital or a private client that they have the access to them, and we're, you know, we're providing them with works to propose, you know. But then I feel like we have a whole sort of like all these groups of people that we work with, the private people, you know, private collectors who, you know, some of them are, you know, maybe it's a smaller group of people, but they're the ones that I can propose the more challenging work to. And then, you know, and then there's the curators that we have relationships that we hope can like facilitate the museum acquisitions, you know. So it's, you know, I mean, I think that's the only way to be, you know, at least in my, like, I feel like I have to have these, like, a pretty diverse range of people I'm working with in order to be, you know, to stay in business, you know what I mean?
Sure.
So,
We haven't had so much luck with the art advisors here.
yeah.
From other places, yes, but you know, the majority of our clients, honestly, are like gay men under 45 with no kids.
Very specific
Hi.
demographic.
So like, I mean, so the people that we're working with are like kind of already sophisticated people because A, we haven't been around that long. B, we're not on the main drag where all the other galleries are. So if you come to us, it's because you're looking
You're
for
very
us.
intentional, yeah.
We do not get people who come in who are unfamiliar with the art world. There's not like, of course, education is what you're doing no matter what, no matter how sophisticated or seasoned a collector is. You know, there's always like, you know, the art world is like a place that always makes you feel dumb because there's always something to uncover. You know, there's always something you don't know. But we, so far, you know, we don't get a lot of noobs.
Yeah.
Yeah, speaking to the portion where about our like demographic, as I mentioned earlier, the sort of clientele for VSF before opening Dallas was, you know, already pretty deeply established. But opening in Dallas, and even, you know, working at a different gallery in Dallas and then moving to this one, there's no guarantee that people are going to just, you know, like, just because you open a space doesn't mean everyone's going to flock to you. So even though we have those art collector base, you know, across the country and in other parts of the world, Dallas is still a area where I am like building relationships again, and with advisors and in Dallas, there's a healthy economy, which means there's a lot of new headquarters and businesses. So there's a big like wedge of this art market where people are looking to find art for their offices, and I haven't quite typed into that with VSF. You know, there are pockets of our program that could work in those situations, but I am still like working on making those connections where those advisors, those decorators are going to reach out and be like, hey, what's going on? You know, I'm working on this project, I'm working on that project. That doesn't happen as much with me currently, but it's a healthy part of what moves here in Dallas, so if I can get in on that. So if anyone out there is watching and is working on a project, yeah.
What kind of trends are you noticing in the art world currently? And do you see some things dying out or hot new things starting to take off?
I'm really bad about following trends.
I was gonna say,
Yeah,
I'm
same.
not gonna, I don't know.
I'm much more interested. I like in recent years, months, I just find myself much more interested in art history. So like I spend times in books that are like looking at art from the 90s, and I'm like, oh yeah, I'm like selling work that's being made right now. I should probably be a little bit more in tune. But I mean, you go to fairs and things,
Yeah.
and you sort of see, and you get a little depressed sometimes.
Yeah. And
but-
I'll find myself like really interested in something in particular, and I feel like it's something I'm, you know, have come up with myself or something. You know, like, oh, this like, you know, this particular kind of textile work I'm really interested in. And then I go to a fair and I like see it everywhere. I'm like, I am so just being fed this probably, and I don't really realize it. And so, yeah, I don't know. I think fairs, which the Dallas Art Fair is a good fair to go to if you haven't ever been to a fair, let's just say. It happens in April every year. Galleries come and set up from all over the place. There's 80 plus galleries or something like that. And anyway, I think fairs are a good place to just quickly see a lot in real life, you know, versus it being virtual. So maybe you're going to pick up on trends there. But I'm not saying fairs. I have a love-hate. I'm sure we all do with fairs.
Hate.
Hate. No, you know, they're very expensive to participate in from the gallery side, and they're also, you know, it's a risk you're taking. They're also a huge amount of work in terms of your time and resources. But it can also be where, you know, your artists are kind of maybe discovered by an important collector or acquired by a museum, which all those things have happened for us, but it's really, really hard too. So
Yeah, I think the Karl Lagerfeld quote, trendy is the last stage before techie, is like something I think about a lot.
Yeah.
But there's like all kinds of trends in the art world. It's not even just about the artwork itself. It's like trends amongst institutions.
Sure.
Right now, there's a trend of galleries closing, which is, you know what I mean? It's like, you know, over a dozen great galleries have closed in the last year in like New York and other places. So like, you're also seeing another trend of like, you know, consolidation, you know, smaller galleries merging with larger galleries, or, you know, those gallerists becoming partners in these larger galleries. So it's the question of trends in the art world is like, it's like a very kind of multifaceted
Yeah.
question that's, I don't know, kind of hard to answer.
Yeah, I mean, I always sort of talk to my students in terms of trends. Like, the art world's just kind of doing this thing, and there's trends that come and go. It's like happens quick. Like right now, like none of you guys said it, but like figurative work is like super hot right now.
Right.
And if you're chasing that in your own work, you're like, I got to get on this like figurative thing that's happening. Like it's already gone by the time you like build up that body of work, you put a show together, you have the show, and then you look like an idiot, like that's doing this really dated thing. So let the art world do this thing, and then artists, you know, are just trucking along, and eventually that shit is gonna line up, and it's gonna
No,
cross
that's
paths.
true. That's totally true, because like all artists have ups and downs in their career, and it's like, I think if you are staying true to yourself,
Yes.
there will be a moment where it's like time for you to shine if the work is really great, you know what I mean? So, yeah, I say don't concern yourself too much with that.
Yeah. But do you guys, not to like beat this horse, but do you guys as galleries notice things like figurative work being hot and be like, I gotta get a figurative show right now, like this is poppin'?
So I feel like figurative work has been like really popular over like the last 5 years probably. And I don't know. I don't think we've had a real figurative show so far. We've had like with like when we did the Lucas Stocklosa show, there was figures in that show, but it's more that show was more about like interiors and like furniture and stuff. Yeah, I don't know. I don't think so.
That's good. Like that.
Yeah, it's just kind
and
of like
I think it's too hard to sort of, you know, try to I mean, just like an artist trying to, you know, make work in line with a trend. I don't know. I think you just try to stay authentic, and you know, I think that just is gonna come through with our group of people, that our audience and our clients. I think we're better off.
I think the next thing will be like things that feel more conceptual. Like I was reading something, I'm forgetting who. I mean, I wouldn't say we're going through a market crash right now, but we're definitely going through a market dip. But this person was talking about in the 80s when there was like this huge crash. Like before the crash, it was like, you know, like David Sally was hot, and who's the guy that painted on the plates? Schnabel was hot. And then after the crash, they couldn't give those things away. And it was more about like Robert Gober, Felix Gonzalez Torres, things that felt, you know, very different than these kinds of like opulent paintings. So maybe that's the new thing.
So yeah.
I think sometimes what also follows is, you know, it's like there's been times where, you know, the art market is like so, you know, robust, and like you can just sell anything, right? It's like, you know, then it starts to get like edited out, where maybe that means there's a high level of craft, and that's important, because, you know, the things that were like made out of something that will, you know, like dissolve in a year from now is just, I don't know, people might be a little bit more intentional in thinking about what they're going to bring into their collection or spend their money on or whatever. I don't know.
I can't believe I said, who's the one who painted on plates?
I'll remember that.
And this sort of goes to a little bit to that question about, you know, chasing a trend, like finding an artist that's like seems like very of the moment. How much time do you think you dedicate to looking for new artists you want to work with, and where or how have you had the most success building new working relationships with artists?
I think we probably all wish we had more time to.
I know. I feel like I used to have more time, and that was just life like allowed me to like go see more, and so now I rely on other things, like I, you know, rely on my team that's working with me. I also like to hear from some of the artists that I work with and trust, like who they're sort of looking at. Yeah, I mean, and then there's, you know, kind of randomly finding things because you've seen something on Instagram or whatever. I mean, you know, there's that too, but I think that I try to get out and see stuff, I really do, but I don't as much as I'd like.
Yeah, I mean, the internet definitely is a great tool. You can see exhibitions from around the world, whether it's at a gallery or a museum, or it's, you know, a friend texts me about a show. Cody and I are often talking about things we see, so there's different avenues that. But yeah, I think it's seeing in person. You know, when you're at the gallery, like, it's not very often that I get to see other gallery shows in Dallas because I'm always at my own gallery. So people often come and ask for recommendations of, oh, like, what should I see while I'm in town? I'm like,
I don't know.
I think I've heard the show is good, but I can't say, like, from my own experience because I haven't seen that show, or I haven't been to that gallery in like a year. So it's a treat when I do get to like make it out to another space and see a show.
It's like, so I was talking about Sonia Kelleher Combs earlier when I was talking about the show that was like probably the most challenging, but yet still like the most fruitful for us. And that was a discovery that, so she's an indigenous artist native to Alaska, and my partner is Cherokee, and I was talking about this at lunch too. So he has like this kind of innate interest in, you know, contemporary art by native artists, and he was reading this interview with Nicholas Galanin, who's like a super famous indigenous artist that, anyway, he was reading this interview, and, you know, Nicholas Galanin was like, the art scene in Alaska is really small. It's kind of just like me and Sonia. And And Chris was like, well, who the hell is Sonia? And like literally a Google search, and you know, we were both super excited. This was like before official plans to the gallery started, but like, you know, we noticed she hadn't worked with a gallery really, but had shown in like lots of institutions in Alaska, Canada, etc. Also like in Santa Fe, California. So we kind of met with her and like bought like something from her studio. But when it cut, like maybe 6 months later, it came time to really start planning opening this space. She was like the first artist that we called, and then we showed her work to a friend of ours, Christopher Schwartz, who owns this gallery in LA called Stars, which has only been around for like 5 years, but it's kind of like really made an impact in LA. And he was like, oh my God, I love this work. This is exactly the kind of work that I want to be showing. And he was like, do you mind if I do something with her too? And I was like, well, why don't we do it together? So it ended up being like this joint presentation in LA and Dallas, and that kind of ended up making a huge splash for her. And now she's like working with a great gallery in New York, et cetera, et cetera. So like sometimes it can be literally as like, you know, not skipping
Random.
one sentence in an interview that you are probably barely reading, you know what I mean? Yeah, and then also friends, you know. Being in the art world for long enough, you end up having a lot of friends who are artists, and you know, even ones in LA and New York, et cetera, are usually really excited about the prospect of showing in Dallas, because it's like I've already shown in New York and LA and like all the, you know, kind of European cities that you would guess. What was the question?
I mean, this is
Where we get artists? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I mean, and this sort of segues into that. I think this is my last question, and this is like the popular student question. What's the most professional, respectable, effective way to approach a gallery as an artist, especially considering that you guys aren't like spending a lot of your time going out and looking for them? And alternatively, just for fun, last question. What's the least professional, respectable, effective way for an artist to approach you?
Oh my God, so I have this artist. She lives here in Dallas, and she like writes me on Instagram all the time, and everything is a fire reaction emoji. She's probably watching. And I'm just like, I can tell what you're up to. Like, why don't you come to the gallery? She's never stepped foot in the gallery. And I was also saying this at lunch. I'm doing this show with an artist this winter, who is like the first kind of like Dallas born and raised artist that we have done a solo project with, and I met her from showing up at the gallery, and she knocked on my door during an install, and I opened the door and I was like, "Can I help you?" And she was like, oh, you know, I this artist that like you're showing, I follow that artist on Instagram, and I really like love their work, and I really want to come see. And I was like, okay, you come in. And you know, she just kind of kept hanging around the gallery, and eventually I was like, okay, why don't I come to the studio? And then we had like, you know, a 2-hour conversation, and like I thought the works had a lot of potential, and I was like, this kind of feels like a really great opportunity that she made for herself, you know? So to me, that was like, that's my, you know, the success story that I have.
Yeah.
And I think that, you know, speaking to that, I often tell artists, you know, be present, you know, come, you know, go to openings and things, but also just go around to the galleries. I mean, seeing other work that is being made now is going to show in your own work that you are informed. I mean, for sure. But also, you know, having this just, you know, people in the community, the art community, whether it's us or artists showing in the gallery or other people that are in the whole ecosystem, you know, just knowing who you are often leads to opportunities, you know, I think. I think your fellow colleagues, artists, can be, you know, some of your best advocates at times too. So.
Yeah, I think expanding and sort of summarizing what they've said is having a genuine interest within like either the program or getting to know. I mean, I promise we're not as intimidating as maybe like some. I mean, walking into a gallery can be a little intimidating,
Right.
And especially if you feel like a little inferior or whatever. But I mean, we're just at the end of the day, we all like love talking about art. So if we get to have a conversation, like that's like, oh, that was a nice visit. Like just to, whether there's like questions that were asked to us or like establishing a personal, memorable relationship too, stands out a lot if you're like meeting an artist in the gallery. And then on the flip side of like what not to do is like don't come to us at like an opening and expect to like show us work on your phone or like an art fair.
Art fair.
Oh my god, that's the worst place
Yeah.
to do it.
Art fair is like top of the list. Do not like talk to a gallerist.
And you know, we're like, as I said, you know, lots of time and resources being spent on like every minute that you're standing in that booth, and it you know, it is not to your benefit to try and talk about work in that moment, you know, because it's pretty stressful for the people that are in that booth. So, and you know, and I think you know, kind of like what Adrian was saying is, you know, I think that when artists come to me and try to, you know, sort of propose their work, and I will sometimes just without, you know, my response to them will be, have you looked at our program? Because, you know, you need to try to see if you fit in there.
Read the room.
And again, it's to your benefit if you are trying to make a relationship with a gallery that your work would fit nicely into, you know, because otherwise it just, you know, doesn't make sense. So
I'm curious, Giovanni Valderas, I had him come talk to a professional practices class once, and this was while he was working at Kirk Hopper, and he gave out some stats that sounded made up to me, but it was like, he said he got like, I don't know, a dozen emails a day from artists just soliciting their work.
I don't get that many.
I don't get that many.
Yeah.
Okay, that's good. I'm just curious, like, do you have a round number of artists just like reaching out to you, and if you've ever shown somebody's work because they just cold emailed you?
Oy.
Oh.
I can't think of a time when I just got an email and looked and was like, oh my gosh. It always it's like the having a mutual contact of some sort is going to just be the thing that makes me spend instead of, I try to now reply to everybody.
That's nice.
I know. I'm not saying that I do, but I try. But, you know, it will, you know, it's like when you're applying for a job. I mean, and somebody kind of gives you a recommendation or something that is going to make that person look at it for maybe just 30 seconds more, you know, or put the sticky note on that application that makes it kind of in a different pile or whatever. I mean, I think that's why like the relationship part of all of this is so important.
I also get like cold emails, speaking of applying for jobs, people just, you know, sending in their resume and saying like, oh my god, I love what you do and I'd love to work there. And I'm like, I don't know you.
Yeah.
Like, I've never seen you here.
Yeah.
So like,
Yeah.
it's kind of the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, all of the like connections we've all made within our careers have been through personal relationships and like personal interactions, whether that's through artists or advisors or curators, and that really is sort of the core of the business.
Yeah, exactly. All
It's
through art history.
just relationships. So if you can leave a good impression or relationship, that will be beneficial to whatever you're setting out to achieve.
Okay. I think with that, I can turn it over to you guys if you guys have questions.
Bye.
I was going to ask if you would share the story that you gave us at lunch about the artist whose work you did see online, and then how your thoughts shifted once you actually did have a studio.
Yes, it was an artist who's here in Dallas and whose work I really liked, and she's been around for a while, and I was kind of excited about it, and I went to the studio, and she was just kind of like, she gave a bad studio visit, is what I'm trying to say. So I think that whenever you do, get someone at a gallery's attention, and they're in your studio, it's kind of like, it's like that new Ina Garten book title, Be Ready When the Luck Happens, Because when I went, she was just kind of like, la 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 la, there's this, and there's this, and I was like, okay, I was like really like looking forward to connecting with this work on a deeper level, and like as I said earlier, I love beautiful things, but they need to be supported by some kind of strong point of view, or some kind of like rigorous underpinning. So be prepared for the studio visit.
And I think like related to that, I think it's important to have, like, I've been in a visit where, it's scheduled and everything, and that there wasn't actually much work, and maybe it's because it's been out. It's out.
I was like, these are all from 2018. Like, what have you been up to?
Or that they've gone out, like a bunch of stuff has gone out for a show. It's like, well, don't have me over, right? I mean, like, I think that also other successful visits that I've been on is when there's work in the studio and that there's like images for me to look at on a computer at the same time, like some chronological stuff that might give me some backstory on maybe what I'm seeing in real life. I think that's another just tip, in my opinion, to, for a good, meaningful visit and the use of someone's time that you're inviting over. Yeah.
I have a follow-up question. You said if someone comes over, be prepared. You said you saw this artist and she didn't do a good job. Could you talk about specifically what did she do wrong? What did you want from her that you didn't get?
Yeah, I think that she didn't come across as serious enough. And that, I don't know, I haven't thought about it that deeply, but like thinking about it now, maybe she thought that she like kind of already had it in the bag, that like something was going to happen, and that, it's, I don't know, you kind of got to work for it sometimes.
And this came up, I was going to say.
Context of what Cody's talking about is we were talking about at lunch, like just general advice that you give an artist, and the thing that I brought up was just being able to talk about your work. That's such an important aspect of it. And then Cody shared that anecdote of like, oh, I've interacted with this artist who was not able to do that, and it like shifted how I like read the work and like my
And from
interest.
like basically wanting to maybe work with her to then being like, no.
Right,
I mean,
exactly.
Maybe not, or whatever. So,
so
being able to like talk about the work, I think is what he was.
Talk about the work. Is there anything else that you would really like to see from an artist when you visit their studio? Or anything else? Don't do this. This is a bad thing to do.
Tripping hazards. Those are usually around.
No, I think what I spoke to, which was, having work in the studio, maybe being prepared with some other images. I'm a big fan of like knowing stuff chronologically, like that's when did this, and so that's why I think I like to see images that led to that work.
Mm-hmm.
I think it informs you as to, was there a huge shift in the work, which is fine, but like just getting a sense of like what their practice is like, maybe over a span of time that's not just in the last 6 months or year, and seeing what came prior.
I'm curious, like you're talking about the artist being able to talk to you in their studio, and I had mentioned this in a question before, but it was wedged into like 6 other questions. But how much do you place the responsibility on the artist to sort of sell their work to collectors?
Well, that's the other piece of when I'm visiting with an artist. It's like I also, to do sales, have to be able to talk about your work, and I cannot do that just making an inference or whatever. So like I have to have as much information as I can, because that is part of the song and dance and romance of like selling the work. It's like having the story, and I don't expect the artist to do anything but make the work. You can barely get them to do that sometimes. But like, every artist that I know, I don't care what gallery they're represented by in a fancy gallery in New York or whatever, every single artist has a complaint about their gallerist. Every single artist has a complaint of they're not doing enough. Every single artist is saying, I have to do all of this stuff, and that is just... I think every artist, there's never going to be someone who works as hard for you as you do for yourself. So you do have to make those things happen. You do have to work on your own connections. You do have to put yourself out there. The gallery's not just going to like, wrap you up in a bow and just, kiss you on the forehead like all the time. So it's like the artist has to hustle too.
And I think that my sort of quantifiable success, kind of, if you're talking about, well, but all facets of it. I think my most successful, like relationships with artists come with the ones who really see it as a partnership, and with that means, that they're out there doing these things too, like whether that means they're putting nice content on their Instagram and kind of sharing what's going on in the studio or whatever, or I was out at this thing and hey, I met this guy and you should follow up with him and maybe we can set up a studio visit or whatever. So I think when the artists are working like it's a business, because it is, in the same way that we are, or in conjunction with us, it really is the most fruitful.
Yeah, I think it is a nice bonus when you do have an artist who you can sort of, who has that ability to do so, because there are some artists who you might not like introduce to your client. I mean, or like to like at the point of like you're like working on this client and you're like, oh, like a studio visit will push this over the edge and they're going to be really interested in it.
Yeah, right.
Some artists can really charm and turn it on, and that is a nice like tool to have. But I think I feel responsible to be able to do it without without needing that. And I think there's to be like educated on it and be able to speak to it.
And you don't, you probably don't maybe have as much of the artists at your disposal in terms of here or where you can just take them over. I mean, some of your artists, yes, but I feel like I have a little bit more of that just because I have more regional artists in my program, and so that tends to maybe has a little bit more impact, But it, some of these artists don't have the ability maybe, or aren't it's not their strong suit.
But you can also always do it. Like I set up things via Zoom with like maybe an artist that's in Baltimore and a curator that's in New York or a writer that's in LA. I wasn't just talking about sales period. I just kind of meant generally opportunities for the artist, outside of the gallery.
Just curious, there might be totally different answers for each of you. Is there sort of a percentage of number of artists that you have like on your roster that you are representing and you're kind of having this long-term ongoing relationship versus people that you're doing one-time kind of a show? And how do you decide, I guess, if you've worked with an artist or an artist, if you want to work with them in more of a long-term relationship?
I mean, so we are like project based for the moment, so we're not officially representing artists. We are just doing projects and exhibitions. With that being said, I kind of mentioned earlier that there's there's a couple of artists that we are working with that we are continuing a relationship with, and that is, and then there's certain artists that we've worked with that we are happy to no longer be working with. So it's just kind of like, do you have a good working relationship together? Was the artist happy with you and the way that
Right.
you supported their show? It's like dating, kind of. It's personal and professional, and also for us, it's been like very organic.
And like I'll have, artists who I include, initially in a group presentation to start, and I think that's a good way for us to kind of, same thing, like test the waters in terms of how we work together, how our audience like responds to their work, if they're happy with it, but if it's kind of both ways, and let that be. Even if I really feel strongly about it, sometimes I have to kind of be like, I think just sort of, or having their work in the back room for a little while or something, like, is it easing into it before, committing to something. But we have a group of artists that we represent, and then we have a kind of an ongoing, a group of artists that we sort of like have in our inventory and work with and try to promote and sell as well, but it's just like a little bit of a different relationship.
Another piece of it for us is that, like, who is at a point in their career that makes sense for us to grow together. So like some of the artists that we've shown, like I mentioned, they might already have a gallery in New York or something else and already have had museum acquisitions and critical writing about their work and great publications. So it's kind of like, I know that me as a small gallery, literally employee of one, me, I cannot help you in your career because the things that I could make happen for you have already happened for you. So it's like, for us, I think going forward with working with artists long term and eventually representing a stable of artists, it has to be an artist that we are on the same, that we can kind of grow together and be on the same trajectory as.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, and percentage-wise, I would say we probably exhibit. Our exhibitions, probably 75% exhibitions are represented artists and 25% project-based. Roughly in
Sounds
that
about
area.
right. Yeah, me too.
I have a question. You guys all kind of mentioned social media and just the ability to essentially self-promote in different ways. When you do things and ends up being sort of a love and hate thing, when you end up feeling like, am I making stuff or am I making videos about my stuff, right? So that can get really, do you have any, I mean, it's a little outside of what you guys do, but your perspective on where's that balance, right? Where you are visible and you're active and things like that, but it doesn't kind of consume all your time. That's one. And my second question is, since we're doing all multiple questions, is how you're feeling about exposing your process. Do you guys like it? Do you guys hate it? Because sometimes, I personally like when I can, figure out how you make that work, but with social media, it's like a step-by-step to do essentially for so much of the work, So anyway, so those are the two things I've been thinking about.
I mean, I think that, obviously I'm going to respect, whether artists, if they want to put content about their lives and studio practice online or not, that is up to them. But I do think that people enjoy like learning the story, which is what, that's part of what we're doing as the gallery, is like telling this story about this artist and about their work. And I feel like social media can be a good like support to that. And then in terms of the, process and revealing and all of that, we actually just had a conversation with an artist, and we're kind of producing this little film about her. And, one of the things she's kind of, I think rightfully so, being a little bit apprehensive about is sharing too much about how her work is made. And so we're trying to like kind of, you know, find the balance of what is so like beautiful about her work is this process, but like not giving it all away. So
Yeah.
we'll figure out what that looks like, and basically, essentially, what we're going to do is let the filmmaker kind of share what with our concerns we shared with him, is then let him sort of like put something together and then see if we're comfortable with that particular edit kind of being the thing that goes out. So
I think it's up to you. I mean, I've worked with I worked with this artist when I worked at a different gallery, who was very, very protective of the process in which you know, they made their art, because I don't want to say a lot of like trickery was going on, because it was like, you know it was the real deal. I'm just saying that there was like, you know.
Things that felt like shortcuts.
Yeah, no, I don't know if shortcuts is the right. If I could say the artist's name, I would, but but he was a great artist. But he was very, very protective about, you know, letting people know exactly how the paintings, you know, what the insides were made out of, et cetera, like this. But I don't know. For me personally, it's like.
do you feel like that hurt him at all in the long run?
No, because I think that was part of the magic, was
Yeah.
when people looked at them, they were like, how did this happen? You know, because there was like this like whole kind of light and space. God, I might as well say his name at this point. I'm like describing it more and more. But I mean, for like me, I mean, I'm a sucker for presentation. So like when I'm putting stuff on the social media, it's like I want it lit beautifully, photographed beautifully, in its place.
That's my primary question, is the amount of hours it can take to do really, really good, high quality social media presence, and that is a job in itself.
Yeah. Yeah, we're very behind on that, so I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think like whatever is sustainable to you is. I mean, I've never like looked at an artist's Instagram and said this person's Instagram is like not good enough. You
Yeah,
know, like,
true.
It's actually kind of nice when, like, I kind of feel like I'm, like,
Hunting?
yeah, like, oh, this person like doesn't really share their practice on their Instagram. Like maybe not a lot of people know about it yet.
Right.
So it kind of feels like you're finding. I mean, I also was with an artist friend this weekend, and she was like, yeah, I haven't posted my work in like a year, and so like people maybe think I'm not doing anything, but I've been at this residency for a year and I'm about to open a show, but I haven't posted any of it. And so it'll just, I don't know, it's.
Wait for the big reveal.
Yeah.
Which is
Yeah.
I
I
but
personally
I think that, you know, speaking just to kind of good lighting and all of these other things, like I think a very, very, very important part of your practice should be, at least if your work is photographable, is to get good photographs. Like either learn how to do the documentation yourself or work with somebody who can, but it is so much of what we're looking at. I mean, you heard us, we're trying to get out and see shows when we can, but often what we're seeing is images first. And that can really be the, you know, the point of where I look a little longer or I don't, if it's a poor image quality that you're sharing with me or something like that. So it is really important.
Especially when you're like at a student level and you might be applying to
Yeah.
a juried show. And we probably all juried something, and there is a whole like curve of documentation.
Yeah. And I think this doesn't have to do with documentation, but applying to juried exhibitions, something I will often share with, you know, students, is to look at who's the juror, and, you know, that can be really, you mean, you've probably all heard this before, but, you know, it can be really important even if you don't get into the show. You know, we have our Cluley Projects has an open call, you know, and it happens once a year. And we only give away one for the year, but we've now like kind of collected this little archive of things that we found interesting, and and that could be the same for other shows that you end up applying to. Is that a curator at a museum or an independent curator or another artist or something has seen your work and then decided to include you, maybe not then or then, but maybe sometime in the future too.
How often are y'all looking at exhibition records when you're looking to work with new artists or new projects? Just because we do have a lot of students here that maybe have never exhibited their work in a really formal way. Do you think that's like more precarious if there's no exhibition record, or maybe it doesn't matter? Are you looking at it?
I mean, yes. It's always like really great to make a discovery, and I think that all galleries at the end of the day they want to give someone great their first show, and have like that that kind of relationship with the artist first, and then hopefully it's like this long-term partnership. But like there's also like a lot of really great things that come with an artist who has already had a really active exhibition history. They're usually easier to work with. They're usually more confident. So there's like, I think, positives about both.
And I think like at Cluley Projects, because we're, the mission over there is to kind of show, we're looking at Texas-based artists who might not have had representation before. And what we hope is that we're giving an opportunity, because we're not, with most of these artists, we're not going to work with them ongoing, But what we hope is that we create, like, they then have expectations for not only what we should provide for them, but what they should provide for us, like in terms of professional practices, like if, what should be expected of you as an artist to be exhibiting. And then I think that talking about exhibition history, I think that, there's also the looking at, is there, are you, I don't know, do you have some discerning, like, are you not maybe saying yes to everything, or I don't know, there's that too, like being intentional about what shows you are doing, although I know everybody needs to get some exhibitions under their belt, so.
I think the most important thing is that you're dedicated to your studio practice,
Yes,
and that you're in
yeah.
the studio as often as possible and making great stuff.
Agreed.
Any last takers? I don't know if anybody's like monitoring the online chat at all, but I apologize if there's anybody that asks questions there.
We'll get to you later.
There
No, I'm
is-
just kidding.
Last questions? Okay, great, wonderful.